All right, this is the first of 3 videos on World War I. We're going to take a look in this video on the main causes, trench warfare, and the Schlieffen plan. So uh, overall, this video is going to go over why it started, which is pretty much, you see in the bottom picture there, it's going to be like a big giant gang fight, and who's got who's back. And it's going to go over the Schlieffen plan, which is going to an idea come up with by the Germans to try and end the war as quickly as possible, but they're going to find out through a new type of fighting called trench warfare, there's going to be no quick, easy end to this war. So let's go ahead and get started. So our first slide here are the main causes of World War I. And for this slide, we're going to use hashtag Vatos Locos Forever. So if you are a fan of the movie Blood In, Blood Out like I am, then you'll have an idea of what I mean. So this kind of goes with distrust. Okay, the European countries right now, we see a little diagram here that kind of shows you who fought in the war, who took which side. Both sides equally distrusted each other. It goes back first with that little bit of self-doubt. We kind of doubt the intentions of the enemies. So that leads to suspicion, anxiety. You get real anxious and nervous about it. That becomes fear, and now you feel like you got to protect yourself. So because of that distrust of each other, and these countries decided to align themselves with other people to have their back. So before we get into it, let's go ahead and look at this video clip here and take a look at kind of what we mean by having each other's backs.
The anesthetic, I got to go back in. Son has multiple contusions. Thoracic vertebra in his back is broken. It's very serious. When will we know if he'll be okay? His spleen is injured, so I got to go back in and try and stop the bleeding. If he gets an abdominal infection, he might be in for a prolonged stay. I'm sorry. That's all I got to say right now.
Shut up, Joey. That bulldogs are gonna pay big time. Shut up. We ain't gonna be hitting them tonight, eh? They're gonna be waiting for us tonight. We're gonna get them tomorrow morning.
In the daylight? It's Sunday, isn't it?
They gonna be going to mass, pendejo. Hey! You don't think I want them, eh? You don't think I want them? I got some poison for a spider, eh? But for tomorrow. Shut up! Paco, hey, go let us see.
What are you doing?
We can't let those punks
Get
come into
out
our
of
barrio.
here! Just get
Pushing
out of
us
here!
around, eh?
Who are you fighting?
That's bulldogs!
Chewy, who are you fighting?
What are you doing? Don't talk to him like that.
Just fighting
What are
yourselves!
you doing? Those are my carnales. They're my family.
I'm your family! We should be taking care of each other, not fighting on a
Hey, if we
street
do nothing, then we are nothing.
Paco! Mijo! No, Minklo.
I'm sorry, Tia.
Okay, so in this video clip, we saw here the hospital scene where one of the members of Vatos Locos, Crucito, had got jumped by a rival gang, Tres Puntos, and now all his homies now had his back, and we're going to go out there and protect him and get revenge, protect their turf. So similar things happened here in World War I, except instead of this just being over turf and respect, you would see in a place like East LA where this movie takes place, there's 4 main reasons why these countries started to distrust each other and feel like they had to defend themselves against each other. The first one here, the bottom left, you see is competition. These countries were competing around the world to see who's the best, who's the biggest, who's the baddest, who can get the most, who can just be the most powerful country. They didn't want each other to get stronger than the other. Like, for example, Germany looked east and saw Russia, like, dude, Russia, they're a little bit behind, but if they ever get their act together, those guys could really be powerful and maybe be more powerful than us. So the Germans are like, we need to do something to make sure that the Russians don't ever get too powerful, because we don't think we could ever stop them if they really wanted to attack us. So maybe you can even, part of that competition, it led to fear. The second reason where we see there with all the planes and the weapons is militarism, which is pretty much where you glorify your military. You want to maintain that strong military. It was pretty much just a big showing off party. Who's got the biggest, baddest weapons, and they just wanted to show off. The next one is nationalism. These countries, they felt very proud of their country, of their traditions. And what's going to happen, some of these bigger countries like Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, they rule a lot of different other countries. And those countries didn't like being ruled by Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, so they looked to the outside, to the Russians, to the British, to the French, and said, hey, can you guys help us get free? So that's going to really start to make those Austria-Hungary and Ottoman Empire kind of nervous, and they feel like, hey, Germany, Bulgaria, we need you to get our back to stop these other countries from talking to our conquered peoples and getting them to fight back against us. So again, it goes back to that doubt, the suspicion, anxiety, fear, eventually to self-protection. And the last one of the most important ones there, has to do with imperialism. Again, these countries, going back to competition, they were competing around the world to see who can have the most territory, conquer the most land around the world. And I figure if they can get into a big old fight and make their enemy weaker, then they could take other things around the world. So long story short, just like here we saw in the video clip with the Vatos Locos Forever, once they start not trusting each other, they feel like they need to get people to have their back, just like you saw in the video clip. Next slide here is when it all gets started. What starts this big Great War? This time it wasn't called World War I. Actually, it was just called the Great War. So what started it? It was one. I mean, it was building up. Things were getting tense. But we can trace it back to one event that's going to get the ball rolling, and that's we're going to call this "Let's Get Ready to Rumble" #carjacking. It all starts here in a small country called Serbia, which is part of the Austria-Hungary Empire. And the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, he's the Archduke of the Austria-Hungary Empire. This dude's like think of like a prince of the Austria-Hungary Empire. Like his dad was the emperor, and then his dad dies. He was next in line to take over. So he's going on a visit of Serbia, one of the countries that his dad owns. And he's taking a look at everything, and the Serbians don't like the Austro-Hungarians. They just don't like them. They don't like being ruled by them. The Serbians are what we call a Slavic people, which means they're pretty much like cousins to the Russians. So they're pretty much going to say, hey, you know what, Russia, help us out here. We don't want to be part of Austria-Hungary anymore. We want to be our own. At first, the Russians are like, no, we don't want to start a war, blah, blah, blah. We don't want to start a war, but the Serbians don't care. We don't care. We want our freedom. So the guy you see at the bottom left there, his name is Gavrilo Princip. He's a Serbian nationalist, and he wants to help get Serbia free of Austria-Hungary's rule. So he's part of a secret society called the Black Hand, who is very proudly Serbian, and they want the Austria-Hungarians out. So as Archduke Franz Ferdinand is visiting the capital city of Sarajevo in Serbia, Gavrilo Princip rolls right up to him, pretty much does a carjacking, rolls right up to his car, shoots him and his wife dead. So the Austro-Hungarian Empire is pissed, and they start rattling some heads, and they're trying to figure out how and why did this happen, who's responsible. And Serbia's like, see, we told you, we don't want to be part of your country. So Austria-Hungary says, all right, you know what, if you guys don't turn over all the people involved here, you know what, this is gonna be bad. So Serbians like, hey, Russia, we're kind of like cousins to you guys. You guys want to help us out? So the Russians are like, you know what, I get it. Let's do it. We got your back. So now Austria-Hungary finds that the Russians are supporting the Serbians, and so they have to get people to get their back. So their next door neighbors, they're kind of cousins. The Germans like, all right, we got your back. So now you have the Serbians and the Russians, and whoever backs up the Russians are going to all fight against Austria-Hungary, Germany, and whoever has their back. So this is like a big domino effect about who's got your back. So pretty much, if I'm just minding my own business and I find out somebody that I said I got your back is going to get into a fight, now I have to get into a fight. So this one assassination, this one kind of carjacking here, leads to one country after another getting into a fight just because they pledge to have each other's back. So the fighting is going to be an interesting way to fight. There's a new style of fighting called trench warfare. In this this slide, we'll talk about trench warfare and the Schlieffen plan. It's going to be called #slow motion. Let's start with the Schlieffen plan. The Schlieffen plan was Germany's plan to try and win the war quickly. They thought, you know what? If you look at the map here, Germany is kind of on both sides. They have people coming at them. They have their neighbors down here, Austria-Hungary, which is right here where you see my arrow moving. But off to the east, the Russians are going to come this way. And then off to the west, they have the French. See, the French and the Russians are both backing up Serbia. So Germany knows they have enemies on both east and west side. So they know that the Russians, they're a little bit farther away, but the Russians are kind of slow. They take a little bit longer to get ready for war. So the Schlieffen plan was, let's go attack France, beat them down, and then once they're defeated, then we can just worry about defending this side, or our eastern border, and then we can focus all our attention on stopping the Russians, and we can win this war. It's actually a pretty good plan. So, but the Germans know that the French are watching them. So we are waiting for you guys to attack. You guys beat us in a war 30 years earlier. We're looking for revenge. We are ready to roll. So the Germans know they can't just go ahead west and attack France, because the French are waiting for them. So their idea is to tiptoe around the French army, which is located on this border, go through Belgium, which is a small country north of France, then come in from behind and attack France where they're not looking. Pretty good. It's actually a pretty good plan. But the problem is a new style of fighting emerges called trench warfare, where you're going to dig all these ditches and trenches, where the trenches are there to kind of protect the soldiers from gunfire. So you have your trenches on one side, they have their trenches on the other, and pretty much anyone caught in the middle is going to get shot and destroyed. So I could talk about this, but let's go ahead and take a look at this video. You would have to pretty much be a superhero like Wonder Woman to survive the place they call No Man's Land. No Man's Land is that place in between the trenches.
This is no man's land, Diana. It means no man can cross it, all right? This battalion has been here for nearly a year, and they barely gained an inch. All right, because on the other side, there are a bunch of Germans pointing machine guns at every square inch of this place. This is not something you can cross. It's not possible.
So what? So we do nothing?
No, we are doing something. We are. We can't save everyone in this war. This is not what we came here to do.
No. But it's what I'm going to do.
Diana! What the bloody hell is he playing at? God! Fire! Just taking all the fire, let's go! 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 Strike them! Strike them!
So in this video, you see Wonder Woman, a superhero. She could survive. Your average soldier would have been destroyed. This kind of fighting makes fighting very, very slow. For going on 4 years, the Germans and the French pretty much their line of fighting never really moved very much. The Germans didn't gain hardly any land. The French didn't give up very much land. It was just a bunch of guys dying using this new, very slow type of war. Now the Schlieffen plan is completely screwed now because it was all bent on it all depended on a quick victory. Well, this is going to make a quick victory completely impossible. So from the video, you see where she was running. This is pretty much what it's going to look like everywhere. Dead bodies, body parts everywhere, all over the place. Because a lot of times, these soldiers, their ideas, the ways of fighting in this time, even though the technology had changed, we had better weapons. The strategy was charge your enemy. Well, you charge an enemy who's holding a machine gun, a lot of people are going to die. This is an actual picture of some soldiers in the trenches getting ready to go out into no man's land and attempt to go attack and take the other trench. Sometimes it worked, more often than not, it did not work.